Part wolf, part dog. Strong, vicious. These are no pets.
Dogs were the first animal humans ever domesticated, descending from an as yet unknown group of grey wolves that probably live somewhere in East Asia. This process of dog domestication began a really long time ago. Maybe as old as 40,000 years ago, but definitely by 14,200 years ago, judging from this dog burial in Germany at Bonn Oberkassel, the oldest dog burial archaeologists have ever found. But when we try and understand how that domestication occurred, we run into some really tricky problems. Domestication requires a really complex relationship between humans and the animal we want to domesticate. This relationship is happening day to day, generation after generation. It's a very complex social and biological phenomenon. A lot of papers that discuss dog domestication, though, never really talk about those relationships. They tend to focus on the morphology of skulls and the bones and DNA, things like that. And that's perfectly understandable because these relationships aren't really preserved in the archaeological record very easily. One prehistoric site in Siberia, though, might give us some tantalizing clues into how these early societies domesticated the dog. In the Siberian city of Ust-Poloy, along the probably frequently frozen riverbanks of the River Ob, archaeologists discovered the remains of at least 128 dogs in this prehistoric cemetery. Lots of other finds too, interesting artifacts, some really good science going on. So using Ust-Poloy as a template, we're going to discuss some of the really interesting factors that might have led to dog domestication and encouraged dog domestication. It's a really interesting case study. And yeah, let's dig into Siberia's prehistoric dog cemetery. Isn't that right? I'm hiking in the woods, by the way, in the snow, because it just gives the Ice Age vibes. It's pure Ice Age vibes today. I have a small confession to make. I've never had a dog. Me personally, I've never had one. I'm more of a cat boy, really. So to help me with this discussion of Ust-Poloy and the society that may have domesticated the dog, I reached out to my friend David Howe. He's an archaeologist. He's got his own YouTube channel, and he's a certified dog lover. And you love them. I suppose you love them.
I do, man. And yeah, they're just like a quintessential part of being human to me. It's truly remarkable, dude. It's like an Ice Age predator that still lives with you in the house that hasn't disappeared. And even if you live in a high-rise in Hong Kong in a studio apartment and have a little like Shih Tzu, or you live out west and have like a dog that helps you hunt, like it's still a remnant piece of the Ice Age and like that artifact, if that makes sense.
Okay, first thing to consider fundamentally when we're talking about dog domestication is literally how did we control the breeding habits of wild wolves. On a fundamental level, domestication is the control of another animal's breeding habits, right? We get to decide who gets to have kids, or our actions inadvertently push a species in one direction or another. In modern dog breeding, dog domestication, that occurs by neutering them or by setting the dogs you like up on little doggy dates. But 2,000 years ago at Ust-Poloy, it seems they had a different method. Most of the dogs at Ust-Poloy were very young. I've got the stats here. 71% of the mandibles younger than estimated adult size, 45% younger than 1 year, 23% younger than 6 months. In other words, they were killing these young dogs probably before they'd had a chance to breed. Whatever rationale they had for culling these dogs, they were domesticating them. If you kill a dog before it breeds, you've taken it out the gene pool. It's domestication. It's a little bit sad for our modern ears to hear that, I think. A little bit sad. But realistically, for a nomadic society traveling through the wilds of Siberia, is there any other way to really control the breeding habits of your dogs that are just running around? Probably not, probably not. And in my mind, it also raises a question I had honestly never considered before. Was dog domestication even deliberate? When I've imagined dog domestication in the past, I've always imagined it as sort of a positive selection of traits. We find wolves that had characteristics and traits that we liked, and we selectively bred for those traits. So it's like a positive selection. But what if, when humans were domesticating wolves, turning them into dogs, we weren't selecting for traits that we liked? We were simply killing wolves that we didn't like, that were too aggressive, for example.
Yeah, humans tend to do that, I think, with a lot of things. If there were wolves that were just outright aggressive towards human camps, because we are in that area an invasive species, like we're from Africa, wolves might have been hostile towards that and were in their territory. They're territorial. So if they came close to camp and we got little kids running around, they might have taken an atlatl to the chest or something. And that would also cause the ones that are less fearful of humans and more, nice they would display that because people would be like, oh, that's just Rex or whatever.
It would be really odd, I think, if Paleolithic hunter-gatherers living across Eurasia looked at wolves and knew that they could select for good traits, and in several thousand years, they'd have a dog or whatever, right? No one had domesticated an animal before. These people weren't farmers. They had never engaged in this process before. No one anywhere in the world had engaged in this process before. I would imagine our relationship with dogs developed very slowly, generation after generation, and that our Paleolithic ancestors, when they're sitting around the fire, animals all in the distance, there's a stream, beautiful, they were far more worried about aggressive wolves than the friendly ones. Maybe they just let the friendly ones be and got rid of the nasty ones.
David, why do you think I'm wearing a hat inside?
Hair loss, maybe?
Hair loss, that's right. This video is sponsored by Keeps.
Guys, male pattern hair loss can be a bummer. Ask me how I know. But you don't have to go through that if you don't want to. Honestly, you don't. Keeps provides professional hair loss treatment from the comfort of your own home, delivered straight to your door. These treatments are clinically proven to work.
Yeah, I used Keeps too. You need to throw it in there.
Did you actually use it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it worked. It definitely worked.
All you have to do to get started is fill out a quick online consultation, and Keeps will match you with a licensed medical provider. I'll try some of this. Going thin. They'll come up with a personalized plan for you, and most men will see results within 6 months. You don't have to go bold if you don't want. You honestly don't. I'm pretty tempted. Honestly, I'm pretty tempted. Keeps has over 5,000 5-star reviews, and they've helped 1 million men keep luscious, thick locks. Men like David. I didn't plan that, honestly. I was just thinking of a fun way to set up the ad read. I had no idea David was a Keepser. Treatment is delivered right to your door in 3, 6, 12-month increments, whatever works for you, whatever plan you and the provider come up with, and you can cancel or pause your plan at any time.
Thanks to Keeps for sponsoring this video and for the free product. Hair loss stops with Keeps. For a special offer to get started, go to keeps.com/Stefan Milo or click the link in the description. That's KEEPS.com/Stefan Milo.
The other thing to consider with dog domestication is why even do it? What benefit does it bring to the community to have all these wolves following you around? One obvious answer is that they can help you hunt. Wolves are very good hunters. They hunt as a team. They hunt exactly as humans do. They could certainly have helped people hunt in prehistory, and we know they did. Whilst researching this video, I found this really cool artwork from Saudi Arabia. It shows a couple of people with bows, surrounded by packs of dogs, hunting animals. This artwork could be as much as 9,000 years old. Humans have certainly been hunting with dogs for a very, very long time, thousands and thousands of years. Another very famous use of dogs in the Arctic is as a form of transport, and that's certainly what they were doing at Ust-Paloi. These dogs were found amongst the remains of harnesses and sledge parts like wooden runners and swivels and stuff like that. These dogs were certainly being used for transport. There's even a handle of a knife which probably shows a dog with a harness on.
When I first saw this, I was like, it doesn't look like a very good dog. And then just before I joined our meeting, I drew this dog And I was
Oh, that's what it is.
and I was like, actually, they didn't do that bad a job.
Whether people in Ice Age Eurasia were using dog sleds is really difficult to say. We basically have no good evidence for that. Some hypothesize that these really enigmatic batons that are found across Europe could have been used to perhaps attach a harness, called perforated batons, or used to be called batons de commandement. Could that be connected in some way to sleds and harnesses? Maybe. No great evidence for that at the minute. The dog remains at Østpoløy, though, may point to another reason why humans domesticated dogs. And it's not one that typically comes to mind when you think of a dog.
Like, you can clearly see that it's some kind of culling or it's some kind of selective breeding process because they're sacrificing a lot of them. And it's hard to say, like, were they sacrificed because you can't see how they were butchered or, the ceremony around it. But this many being killed indicates to me that either, like, they were using them for food or something. I can't remember if the paper addresses that or not.
At least like 5-6% of the remains, I think, were butchered for sure.
4% of the dog remains at Østpoløy show cut marks. Now, granted, 4% isn't loads, but you have to bear in mind that archaeological record doesn't preserve everything. All we can say is that these dogs there were certainly being butchered, at least some of them. And they might have been eaten, who knows? Again, when we're trying to imagine this Paleolithic society domesticating the dog, what's their day-to-day concern? Is it moving through the landscape? Or is it food? Are these wolves that are hanging around camp guardians, friends, buddies? Or are they lunch? Are they just literally lunch? And that maybe all these other jobs that we have for dogs developed later, after we already decided to eat them. Not me, I've got cheese and tomato sandwiches, but people do eat dogs across the world, and in Europe too. This is a photo of a dog butcher's in Paris in the 1900s. Not that long ago. Humans in Europe even too were chowing down on dogs. Another reason that these dogs were skinned and butchered could have been for furs. The Newchalnath, I think I'm saying that correctly, who lived across the Vancouver Island, I believe, they even bred dogs in the same way humans bred sheep for their wool and sheared the dogs and turned it into blankets. Until recently, too. There's still photos of these wool dogs. I just learned that too. Shout out Joseph.
Germonprix, is there? Mitya Germonprix is the researcher's name. Her idea for other Paleolithic sites too is that dogs or wolves are being used for their pelts. Because rather than stretching out a huge bison hide or reindeer hide on a thing, a wolf hide is a lot easier to tan. And you can also use it to like sew up more. It's more flimsy than like a thick bison hide. So you can like use it to patch up fur, or maybe they were wearing hats out of it or wearing a wolf, the classic. I think every culture wears a wolf pelt on their head at some point. Vikings, Native Americans, Romans, like yeah.
At some point, everyone realizes, it looks absolutely badass to put a wolf skull on your head.
Exactly. And that definitely happened. With the amount at this site, I would say that happened. Yeah.
But yeah, thinking about dog domestication, I think, again, before I was really deep into researching this video, I had a very romantic idea. These dogs were our buddies. We were hunting partners. We were doing this and that. And certainly dogs help humans hunt, but maybe the initial motivation to domesticate them was just lunch and a warm jacket. That's a big concern when you're living in the Ice Age. Those things are not to be dismissed easily. They didn't have cheese and tomato. Or bread, not even bread. Going more into the woods now. Dingley Dell. The dogs at Østpoløy were sacrificed. These were sacrificial victims. Not only is there just loads of them all in this one place, hundreds of dogs, probably at another time even more. Hundreds upon hundreds of dogs buried here. Judging by their ages, they were deliberately killed, and some of the bones have been modified. Some of these mandibles have had holes drilled through them so that they could be suspended, either as an item of clothing or perhaps on racks. Difficult to say for sure, so much time has passed, but they were doing something with these animals. Ethnographically too, from this region, we know that some groups in Siberia, some traditional tribes, traditional peoples, nations, however they like to be referred to, also sacrifice dogs. They would do this when groups would come together to sort of keep the peace in the area between all these different tribes, appease the gods, keep the peace. By the time it got to the historical period, modern period, they weren't eating these dogs. That had become taboo. Maybe it always was taboo in the region around Ust-Paloi, but they were still sacrificing them. Oh shit, this is slippy now. I need to appease the god dogs to let me down this slope without cracking my back. Could it be that one of the motivations for domesticating wolves was to satisfy the religious needs of the community, the spiritual needs of the community? I know some of you in the comments are gonna kick off at that idea. Bloody hell, archaeologists and ritual, blah, 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 blah. But anybody who thinks that humans don't go to great lengths to satisfy their spiritual ideas, you're straight up crazy. Of course we do that. We do that all the time. People in the Paleolithic may have been exactly the same. Exactly the same. If in this hypothetical scenario, wolves had become essential to the spiritual needs of the community, it could have driven them to encourage wolves to be around, to encourage dogs to hang around, so that when they met up with their neighboring group, they had lots of dogs and wolves to satisfy their religion, their needs, whatever it was. It's possible, it's possible. Humans do some out there stuff. We really do. These ideas as well are not mutually exclusive. Something that was important economically or for your food can become important spiritually. Maybe frequently does become important spiritually. And when we're imagining societies in the past, we can't ignore the fact that humans sometimes act a little bit irrationally, right? We are not just these pure economic units. Obviously we have to eat and drink every day, but we have a lot going on up here, and people in the past did too. Dogs could have been domesticated to act as sacrifices. So far, all we've discussed is the benefit to humans. Why do humans do this? Why would they benefit that? Blah, 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 blah. But is there any benefit to wolves being domesticated, to dogs being domesticated? What's in it from their perspective? Probably humans and wolves are more successful hunting when they do it together. And there's some benefit to that for both of them. Well, the snow is getting deep. But we're not really unlocking a new environmental niche for wolves, right? Wolves can hunt on their own. They're very successful hunters on their own. What benefit could there be to hanging around with us upright apes? Well, Ust-Paloi may hold one final clue. The dogs there ate loads of fish. And this isn't the only prehistoric site where dogs seem to be eating a lot of fish either.
The Coster site in Illinois is the oldest dog burial in the Americas. It ate a lot of fish. So whether there's taboos around that or, because you have that much meat in a higher latitude to eat for yourself, you then have the time and energy to do more fishing as well. It's not just subsistence where you can feed all those dogs. But there are definitely places too where dogs are eating meat. It just seems that I didn't correlate that until you just said it, but in the Arctic and North America, and then at this site too, they're eating a lot of fish.
The Costa dogs David mentioned were these dog burials in Illinois that are about 10 to 11,000 years old, I think. Earliest evidence for dogs in North America, in the Americas, but I do believe almost certainly the first people to get to America brought dogs with them. Whew! Jeez, it's getting cold. We just don't have evidence for it. But the Costa dogs also ate lots of fish. Now, wolves can fish on their own. When there's the salmon run, you can find a clip of a wolf fishing a salmon out of the river. Why wouldn't they? But they're not great fishers. They're certainly not as good at fishing as humans are with our nets and lines and traps. We take fishing to a whole nother level. There's no one who's as good at fishing as us. Whew! Believe it or not, that's a lake right there. It's totally frozen. But a wolf can't fish in that lake. A human could though. Human could get a fish out of there we're very good at getting fish and mammals out of lakes. Maybe the environment that first brought humans and dogs together was not like the steppe. I always picture it on the steppe. I don't know why. Whenever I imagine the Ice Age, I imagine the steppe. But maybe it was along rivers, along coastlines, places where there was abundant fish for humans to catch, abundant resources to share with a pack of dogs. Think about it, once you've got a pack of dogs following you around, or wolves even, that's a lot of food you need, that's a lot of extra food you need, because they're not getting it out of there on their own. No way. Did dogs evolve to eat fish? I don't know. It's possible, man. It's possible. These are the kind of ideas we're thinking about today. I was kind of hoping I would run into a dog for this scene up here. Didn't though, did not. No dogs at the frozen lake today. As we said already, a lot of the dogs at Ust-Paloi were seemingly sacrificed, disarticulated, skinned, all of these things. But there were a few dogs that were treated a little bit differently. In the same part of the cemetery where the only human remains have been recovered, archaeologists also recovered the remains of some fully articulated dogs, just placed in the ground, no holes in their jawbone or anything like that. Now it could be that these dogs were sacrificed just like the other dogs were as well, and that sacrifice just hasn't left an archaeological trace. Very possible. But knowing everything we know about humans and dogs, it's also very possible that these dogs were pets, for want of a better term. These were the most beloved dogs, the most cherished dogs, and they were placed in the part of the cemetery fully articulated just with the humans, alongside the humans. Judging from the 14,000-year-old dog burial in Germany, the Costa dogs in Illinois, humans had developed this close relationship with dogs from very early on, way back into the Paleolithic. This doesn't just say a lot about dogs and their domestication, it says a lot about us too.
I would argue, like, even further too, like, I think a lot of people don't think about this. We're clearly human by the time we're like painting in Lascaux and Chauvet and stuff like that. We're human. But you're not truly human to me. Like, we can definitively say, like, okay, we got this figured out, like our mind and stuff, when you're not only burying people, but you're extending that right onto a non-human animal and, you know, treating it, telling you, like, I love you. Like, I don't know if they're doing that back then. But you're taking that idea of, like, I'm human, I have a life, I exist, and you're putting that onto a non-human animal. So, like, the debate isn't, like, when are we human? At that point, it's like you're passing that on to something else already. So, like, that's a significant marker for me in human mind evolution, or just humanity. Anyway.
Yeah.
Are you getting a dog now?
Nah. I'm not gonna get one.
So, like, the gears turning.
How predictable is that? Hiked and filmed all the way up this mountain in the rain. As soon as I finish, the sun comes out. Look at how gorgeous this place looks with a little bit of sun. Never mind. Such is life, innit? Such is life.